What is the best vacation that you've ever taken?
Oh, that's a wild. You're going to regret having that as your opening question. I've driven from Ireland to Mongolia before with a couple of friends of mine. I suppose you could count that as a vacation. So yeah, we drove a third of the way across the world in a very old 1 liter Nissan Micra. So I would definitely classify that as my best vacation. I can go into more detail if you want, but it's a big story about how it came about.
Yeah, so I have questions. How long did this trip take?
8 weeks, 8 weeks, all through the summer holidays. I actually had to take a week off of work at the very end of school. I was really lucky. My principal was happy enough to give me the last week because we were raising money for charity while we were doing it. So I
Oh,
spent
okay.
the entire time traveling. And then when we reached the finish line, because it's like this, it's a race that they have in Europe. Um, when we reached the finish line in Mongolia, I then had to fly back and start work the very next day. So it was
Oh,
literally leave school, like got picked up by my friends from the school I was working at, and then all the way to the finish line, maybe 3 or 4 hours of celebrating, and then straight onto a plane back from Russia, all the ways back to the UK where I was teaching at the time.
oh my, oh, it's just so long in the car. I,
Oh well, we were
after,
stopping. We stopped every so often as well. You have to take in the sights when you're traveling and you're going through so many different countries and different cultures. Like it was absolutely incredible, just the different things you saw along the way. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. I would probably, if I could, extend it by an extra 2 or 3 months. It's just it was the most phenomenal experience.
man, I mean, I probably couldn't commit to 8 weeks, but probably that because that's just a long time in a vehicle. I would probably just hop a flight
Oh,
just to the
and it's
next
and it's
country I'm
not
in.
just it's not just any vehicle as well. It has to be a ridiculously small, unsuitable vehicle.
Oh,
That was the
see,
catch to the whole thing. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen a Nissan Micra before, but it's like a proper old, small, tiny. It's an old person's car, is what we would call it in Ireland. It's like what your grandmother would have drove to church in. That's what we say here. So it does not belong on a big, massive road trip. But that's the whole point. It's a ridiculous rally with ridiculous cars for ridiculous people.
oh wow, oh goodness. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Take a Space Podcast. I am your host, Leah, and this week I am so happy to be joined by Ty. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, we are in the midst of our part two of education, and we have been talking about education from the perspective of the teachers and the principals and admin, and just so that the parents and students can learn to advocate for themselves a little bit better in the educational space, so they can be proper advocates. So, Ty, if you don't mind, can you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. So I qualified as a science teacher in Ireland back in 2015. And Ireland is a little bit unique in terms of, I suppose, the demand that they have for teachers compared to the supply of them. We were far out supplying the country with teachers than the demand that was there. So a lot of teachers like myself traditionally would leave Ireland to teach abroad. So I chose to go to the UK just because it was a little bit closer, meant I could travel back and see family a bit more regularly. But it's not uncommon for Irish teachers to travel to the US, to the Middle East, to the places like Dubai, or even as far as Australia as well. So for us, we kind of have traveling in our blood and going and seeing other educational systems. And last year, then I traveled back to Ireland and started teaching in Ireland again. So I'm really getting that opportunity to see the differences between different educational systems and really kind of get to look at the depth of where the strengths and weaknesses are in both systems. And as well as that, I do quite a lot of stuff on social media. My TikTok in particular has seen quite a lot of growth within the teacher community, and I've really been lucky to meet so many different teachers from all over the globe. There's a huge amount of US teachers that I now am in contact with regularly, quite a lot from Canada, South Africa, loads of different places. And just hearing what education is like for them in their countries has been a real eye opener. And often I feel quite lucky to be from Ireland and to be able to teach in Ireland when I hear about horror stories really from other education systems, but also look at what people are doing to, come over all the difficulties they're having in the classroom and be really ingenuitive and coming up with new techniques and new styles of teaching and new technologies and all sorts of different stuff they're implementing. So I feel quite privileged in that sense. I'm the only teacher in Ireland doing what I do on social media. So yeah, I feel quite lucky to be in the situation I'm in.
So are there are more students who are graduating from university and saying, well, I want to be a teacher, than they actually have spaces for in Ireland?
I suppose that, yeah, that's probably the easiest way of saying it really, is that there's a lot more teachers graduating, and like, I think a statistic that came out in the last 12 months with primary school teachers is that Ireland will produce 13,000 more Irish primary school teachers than they have space for within the system. And those 13,000 teachers need to go somewhere else. They need to potentially go to the UK. More likely they'll probably end up in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. That seems to be a very common place for our primary school teachers to go. Or they'll leave teaching before even getting into the classroom, really. And that's the crying shame at times in the system, is that, we're producing all these wonderful teachers and they're trained so well. The style of training has really suited the teachers and the education system that we have here, but we just don't have capacity at times. And there are obviously areas within our system that there's a shortfall. There's a shortfall within science, which I'm lucky enough to be a teacher in. And they need more physics and chemistry teachers, and they're always crying out to try and find a few more of those here and there. But there are, again, other subjects that there's a surplus of teachers and they have to go elsewhere to try and find work. But yeah, we're producing a huge amount, and I think a lot of it comes down to when we look at students who are doing their secondary school exams, they're actively looking to get into teaching. It's not a case of it's a fallback kind of career. They aspire to be teachers in the future. At 17, 18, they actively want to be teachers. It's not that they want to go into industry and then if it doesn't work out, there's always teaching. They want to be a teacher and make a difference to the next generation. I think that's probably a huge reason why we have the kind of situation we have at times in Ireland.
What is making so many people want to be teachers in Ireland? What are you all doing in the education system that is drawing so many people in?
I suppose I controversially answered a similar question to this on my Instagram story actually during the week, and I think it comes down to the government involvement and how they've set up a system that allows you to actually progress within teaching without struggling financially. I think that's the part that kind of really makes a difference when I look at Ireland versus the rest of the world, really. Our system is kind of maintained that every year you teach and the more time you spend in the classroom, there's going to be a slight pay increase every year for 35 years, and it's not based on performance, it's based on just time and experience within the classroom. So again, I suppose if you're looking from a financial side, which you kind of have to as well as an adult, I mean, it's all well and good saying that we want to be in teaching because we love teaching, and trust me, that is by far the driving force for a lot of people. But when you've got bills to pay and you've got a family to feed and you've got all of these expenses, if you're not able to put food on the table, then you might have to think about leaving the career. It's a huge driving force. Right. So that's something that kind of is taken away from the fear within Ireland, is that, you always know that financially there should be that progression for you. So you don't have to worry about that. And your concern turns more to, how do I be a better teacher in the classroom for the benefit of my students? That's where our big focus is. And in terms of how, again, going back to the pay, it's not the school that's responsible for the pay. You're seen as a public servant. So the government directly pay you. It's not the school's responsibility for your pay, it's the government's responsibility. So your principal, the admin within the school, they don't care about how much you cost as a teacher. They care about whether you're a good teacher. And that's the driving force. And I see that as the big difference really about why so many people stay teaching in Ireland, why they're not leaving the career within the first 5 years, and why we have the relationships we have with students. When we're not leaving our school unless it's to move closer to home, to be near family. You're staying in a school because you want to be part of that community and you want to ingrain yourself. You're not moving school to try and make more money, because there's no pay incentive to move schools. You'll only be going up the same amount you would have been previously anyway. So for us, it's really about building a community and being a central part of it and helping as much as possible, which I absolutely adore. I absolutely adore it compared to what we see in the US, where we see in the UK, where the schools are responsible for paying you as a teacher, and you're arguing with your admin or with your principal about how much you should be earning as a teacher, and they're saying, well, go get me the results, show me that you're an amazing teacher by getting the kids to get this incredible result, which quite often is unrealistic, because we know students aren't all capable of getting the targets that they're set. And that for me is the big difference. You know, you see teachers struggling day in and day out with students because, again, no fault of the teacher or the student. Sometimes a student's life is dramatically changed overnight by some event that's after happening to them. And you're then saying, well, we need to still cram academia down this child's throat so that they can hit a target so that I can get my pay increase. I don't think that's justifiable. I don't think it's fair on anyone.
I think that's a good point, because when we have more child-focused education, then we can actually focus on the child and not necessarily on whether or not you can keep your lights on or whether or not you have an argument with admin that's going to impact your teaching ability. If everybody's there to support the children or the students in the community, to support the community, then I feel like we can have more child-focused education, because that's what we're there for. And that's really cool. I don't really see that a lot. This is probably the first time that I've ever really heard that. And because I was always wondered, would that be possible? And I mean, you're showing me that it is, but that's really cool. And it is really cool.
Yeah, it's really nice. And like, the more that I look at it, the more I realize how privileged we are, because it's not there in a lot of countries that, you know, there's that pay progression naturally throughout your entire career, you know. And I can understand, like, people will obviously say there's negatives to that as well, that, you know, 20 years down the line, if you're still getting your pay increase, are you really worth that, or are you getting lazy over time? But I think generally, when I look at different teachers around my school, particularly the ones who are 15, 20 years into a career, they're still passionate about being a teacher. They're still caring about how they teach their students and trying new things. And that for me is great to see, because it kind of disproves what people outside of education tend to say about it, you know. And yeah, I kind of feel lucky. And like, I've been in the other side of things as well, where it's a pay on based on performance kind of system, and you feel disheartened because you're constantly fighting against admin about whether or not you should be getting a pay increase. Or you go, you know what, I'm not enjoying this because X, Y, and Z in admin might not necessarily be someone that likes me, so I'm going to move school and then I'm going to try and climb the ladder there. Or, you know, I know I'm worth more than this, but the school is shortfalling me, so I'm going to move school to get more. And they're playing one against each other. And you're kind of like, I got into teaching to be a teacher, not to be constantly fighting these battles, so I can just survive as a human being.
Very true. Very true. Let's look at some interesting points that you, and I just like lost my thought. I really did. I just lost my thought. Okay, let me try to backtrack. Okay, so you are a secondary teacher, correct?
Yes, yeah. Secondary science is kind of where I specialize, but the last year or so I've spent a bit more time doing what we call resource classes, and it's a bit like more like special education. I do like lots of one-on-one lessons with students who might have a difficult background, that might not necessarily have two parents in the household, that they might be missing a male role model, or just need a little boost and little, you know, conversations with an adult that can kind of help them more socially, rather than just focusing on academia, which has been a really, really pleasant change to my kind of role as an educator. I really feel at times now that I'm actually making a much bigger impact on a student's life than when I have a class of 30.
So is that something like, because it sounds more like mentorship, where you're assisting?
At times. Yeah, at times it is a bit like mentorship as well. Like there are sections where there's particular students I work with where I might see them 3 or 4 times during the week, and at some stages I'm looking at, you know, how they organize themselves for lessons, making sure that they've got their homework complete, and like kind of forward planning for them. But then other stages, I am teaching them science and maths and kind of going, okay, this is what we need to deal with so that you can do X, Y, and Z when you're in your traditional science class. And that's kind of where I'm kind of focused. But again, the students that I tend to be given are the students that just need that little bit more assistance so that, they, I suppose, from a more holistic point of view, can also then challenge everyday life. You're almost teaching them within your subject how to cope with other situations that they'll have to deal with outside of school.
So the life skills that they would need.
Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of life skill work.
So I just remember my question. In talking about the teachers who have been in their role for 10, 20, 30 years, right? Then they're older. So how did you all handle the pandemic situation when you all were quarantined?
When the first quarantine kind of hit in the UK, I was very lucky at the time. I was working in a technology driven school, so all of our students had Chromebooks, all of our students had either a Chromebook or an iPad, and we were very technology driven anyway. We were already using the Google Suite in full use, and we absolutely adored it, and Google Classroom, and we were really working around that anyway. So it didn't make a massive difference to us in terms of our the kind of day-to-day running of the school. The only difference was it was just virtual instead of in person now. So it was slightly different for us in that sense. It was more, we had a lot more paperwork behind the scenes then to check if kids were completing homework, if they were responding to emails. That's where our kind of day-to-day changed, where that was stuff that you were able to deal with in class, because you would have seen if little Johnny was after handing in his work, because the work would be there physically in front of you. Whereas online, you're kind of going, okay, is he not handing in the work because he hasn't seen it? Is it because he hasn't looked at material? Then you're reaching out to home, contacting home, making the phone call saying, has he logged on to his Google Classroom today? And those kind of little checkups, that was what became a lot more driven for us. But initially for me, it wasn't a major issue. But that was just, I think, very unique to our school because we were so technology driven. But for other schools and for other teachers, I know that it was a big, big change. They really struggled with the older teachers to try and get them on board, and kind of more so setting them prescribed homework, that it was the same type of work in every day, that they were saying, okay, use your textbook to answer page 24 and 25, or likewise saying, okay, I want you to look through these set of slides and answer these questions. That was kind of what they were having difficulty with, was trying to get them to vary the type of work that they were doing virtually.
So as you had to pivot, were you only in the UK or were you in Ireland as well during the quarantines?
So I was in the UK for what I would call quarantine 1. So I was teaching in the UK from about 2015 through to 2020. So I spent 5 years there, and then March time was when COVID and our lockdowns hit. So at the end of March, we went into our lockdown right through until the end of July. And then at the end of July, kind of towards tail end of lockdown 1, we were allowed travel again. And that's when I had essentially planned anyway to up my entire life and move back to Ireland. So I moved back to Ireland in the middle of a global pandemic. It seemed like a great idea at the time, and I do not regret it. I actually think it was probably one of the most sensible decisions I ever made in my life. And had to wait a couple of months for my teaching license to clear so I could teach in Ireland. And that was during kind of lockdown number 2, which was when I really started to do a lot more on TikTok and on Instagram, where I started to run some online lessons for kids, because all of Ireland and all of the UK was back into lockdown for the second stage. And I said, you know what, I know that this platform is here. I've already been using it for a couple of months. I'm going to start doing some online lessons, a bit more fun than what probably a lot of students are getting virtually anyway, having a bit more interaction, having a bit more of a laugh, and just kind of teaching it in a normal human being sort of way, which is how I like to teach my lessons in person anyway. And that really worked for me. Lots of I gained quite a substantial following from doing that online. And then kind of towards the end of December, start of January, I was picked up by a school in Ireland once my license was after clearing. and I've been with them since, and I absolutely love the school, and it's just been really interesting to finally be back teaching in Ireland again, and really just enjoying being an educator.
As the students return back to, full 100% out of quarantine school, and because you all are 100% in person, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now the students are back in school 100%. Did you see any behavioral or social or emotional changes that happened in the students, even at, the teenage range?
Definitely, there's been some really interesting kind of social cues that are now missing. Particularly inside in classrooms, students don't talk to each other. They just don't talk. They don't know how to socialize and communicate effectively. And we actually had some CPD recently as a staff to discuss how do we create more environments for our students to actually talk to each other and interact socially. So we're really trying to push back out group work, trying to push back out situations where students have to communicate with each other rather than just communicating with a teacher. But even teacher and student, we see a lot less of it where, the students aren't putting up their hands as frequently to ask questions or to answer. They're a lot less keen than previously. And we already know students aren't that keen to answer questions publicly and put up their hands. So it's been a real drop off. But yeah, we're just really surprised at how little interactions they have between each other inside in the classroom. And me being the kind of energetic teacher I like to be and a little bit crazier, I tend to go, right, how do I, where possible, make my lessons probably a little bit more chaotic than what I would have traditionally liked, but situations where the kids are having fun, and if they're having fun, they're more likely to be talking to each other. So as a science teacher, you have so much scope to create chaos in a classroom by bringing in crazy experiments where, one that we've been doing recently that got a lot of my students quite active was, we were looking at crash testing different materials to see if we could kind of, replicate what car crashes are like for car manufacturers, and they're breaking eggs all over the classroom. They're throwing them or dropping them from different distances and heights, and there's things going flying everywhere. But the students are interacting, having fun, and suddenly that's kind of getting them back to where they need to be socially, actually communicating in person rather than trying to do things through screens. So yeah, that's the big one that we noticed. The other second one is just the level of anxiety students have. It's absolutely insane. Just, we cannot believe how many students, particularly new students coming into secondary school, the maturity levels are a lot less. We have traditionally, you have 12-year-olds coming into secondary school for us in Ireland, and they're still almost trapped in the mindset and the behaviors of 10-year-old kids you'd get in primary school. They're just lacking the social interactions and the behaviors you'd expect from that age, and the anxiety as a result, and the resilience is a lot less than what you'd expect, and the anxiety is through the roof, and you're trying to kind of cope with that and give them the time and the space and the support that they need to try and help them go, actually, look, you're 12 years of age now. Sometimes you're going to have to do things a little bit more by yourself than what you would have probably had in primary school. But they were, 2 years in primary school virtually. The two big years that they would normally mature a lot more was taken away from them. And now we're seeing the impact.
So aside from group projects and trying to create chaos in the classroom, because I really like that idea of the more chaotic in a learning environment, the more chaotic things could be, you can see how the students would create order in that chaos. Like, what would a student pick up on? What would a student focus on? How would a student, learn how to regulate themselves in that kind of environment? So I think that's a pretty cool concept. What are some other ways that you all or teachers in the community that you've created that I want to talk about in a little bit have seen and implemented that has helped engage students more in the classroom now that everybody's here 100% or everybody's in person 100%?
I suppose there's just a lot more creativity from teachers and how they're trying to do tasks within a class, and probably trying to incorporate certain aspects of student lives from the last 2 years and what they've been used to, but in a classroom perspective. So I've seen some interesting stuff where, I suppose I came from a TikTok background, so you're seeing a lot more teachers talking about students and saying, oh, is there a filter on TikTok that you could use to make a video about whatever topic we're doing, and make a video for us and post it up on Google Classroom as a homework assignment. Or one I heard another teacher talking about recently was where they said, I think they were talking about Henry VIII, and in some sort of history topic they're talking about, and they said, okay, let's make profiles for Instagram for Henry VIII on paper. So I want you to draw what their profile would look like, and I want you to, what would Henry VIII's profile picture be like? What would he have wrote in his bio? What would his first post have been? What hashtags would he have used? This is the thing they're used to. And they said it brought out a lot of creativity in their students, because this is the things that they're doing outside of school. Right. They're making a post on Instagram or making a TikTok, and they're thinking about hashtags, but now they're doing it from the perspective of that topic. And I thought, that's great. We're not just sticking to the prescribed old traditional ways of doing a homework task. We're thinking about what the kids are doing and trying to find a way that we can incorporate that into our topic, what we're teaching them in the class. And I think that's a very interesting style of teaching. Obviously, by controlled chaos isn't for everyone, but I think taking aspects of student life and bringing them into the classroom is a great way of keeping them engaged and caring about what they're learning.
Yeah, I really like the idea of taking real life situations and applying it to the course, because that's the only way I learn. Like, I need real life application. You can't just teach me science and not know I don't know where to put it. Teach me math and I'm like, well,
it's my biggest pet peeve. Yeah, it's my biggest pet peeve. I think the big habit, particularly with science, and I've seen it with so many teachers in the past, you learn your physics to a university degree or a master's degree. You got all of this physics knowledge. And I've interviewed physics teachers before. I was a head of science in the UK. So we were always looking for physics teachers, and you'd have these incredibly intelligent people coming in. They would be teaching a physics lesson, and they would take it to this incredibly high spec that would be beyond what I was capable of, not realizing that they're teaching 12 and 13-year-olds who have absolutely no concept of what that person's talking about. You just need real people. You need real people who are going, okay, how do I actually use this in real life? Let's teach the kids about it that way. Right. And that's probably where I become a bit stronger than a lot of other teachers, maybe. Like, I'll be the first to admit, like, I have my university degree in biology and chemistry, and I was always a biologist, and I absolutely adored it. But I'm probably a stronger chemistry teacher, or even maybe a stronger physics teacher, because it's where I'm academically weakest. So I've had to force myself to learn how to teach it from the perspective of a student who would also struggle with it. And that makes you a lot more useful.
Yeah. I don't know if many teachers think like that, but if they don't, they should. There was an event that happened on TikTok that you put together that kind of brought together a lot of teachers from different communities, different countries, different areas, different backgrounds. Why don't you tell the people a little bit about the Teacher Olympics that you created?
Sure thing. So around June time of 2020, when the actual Olympics were due to take place, they obviously were cancelled. And we had noticed in the UK that I knew probably 2 or 3 TikTok teachers at the time in the UK. But in America, there was this teacher hype house. There was 2 or 3 different kind of groups of teachers, and there was it seemed hundreds of different teachers on the platform from the US, and they were meeting up and they were having a great time together. And I said, you know what, now it's about time that the UK and me as the only Irish teacher, it's about time that we actually took them on and challenged them a little bit. So I put out this little post out, basically I threw it out TikTok to see what kind of response it gets, saying, if there's other UK teachers or if there's other teachers from different countries, I'd like us to compete against the US and maybe create our own little Teacher Olympics. And I took this insane response. I was expecting, we might have one UK team, we might have, a Canadian team, and we'd have that teacher hype house from the US. And next thing I knew, there was over 24, 25 different teams. There was 250 different teachers, and we're talking like there's up to teams of 10 that were competing in this. And
Wow.
we just had teachers all over the world wanting to take part in this and actually do something active and fun with other teachers on a global scale. Yeah, we had Canada, the US, Colombia, we had Sweden and Denmark. No, sorry, Sweden and Finland. I'm getting that wrong. They'd kill me if I said that. Sweden and Finland. We had a couple of teams from the US. Me being the only Irish teacher on the app at the time, I decided to make myself impartial and neutral, and I was the judge for everything. So that was my way of keeping everything fair and square. If I was the only one that could be blamed, at least no one else is getting the blame for any disruption in results. So and I also got to set the tasks, which was great. I was having a great time laughing at everyone doing all of these ridiculous tasks I'm after setting up, and everyone sending me these amazing videos. So I was delighted with my little role. But yeah, it was incredible, and it lasted probably, I don't know, was it 6 to 8 weeks or something like that? That was how kind of the duration of time, and there was some fantastic videos. And again, I absolutely adore the teacher community that's on TikTok. I think that they are just, there's so many positive people out there, that are one being inspiring for their own students, but being inspiring in general, and it was just great to be able to say, I helped bring that community together. I'm still in contact with a huge amount of them from all over the world. There's people in Canada and America that I'm dying to go over and see. They're just the most amazing teachers in the world. And to be able to say that I was able to put that together for somewhere where we entertained a lot of other teachers and educators and other people on TikTok, it felt great.
So how now do you feel like next summer is going to be even bigger, or you want to do this as like a regular thing? Because what I'm finding is that there's a lot of educators who get stuck in these silo conversations, and they don't really have this global community that they can reach out to. Like, yes, the internet is there, and now that we have social media, people are able to connect a little bit more with other people, but I don't think I've heard of this many teachers who have come together in a social space to talk about what they love, and kind of on a little bit of a competitive scale. So do you think that this would be something that you want to continue to do?
Do you know, I would love to be able to run it again. I think at the time I found it very difficult to manage between teaching, and I was moving countries at the time as well, so that made it a little bit more difficult. And
Right.
it was one that I thoroughly enjoyed. And a lot of people came back and asked me would I do it again this summer. And and again, even though I said I couldn't do it this summer just because of my own time frame and things I was busy with, they said, well, would you do it in 2022, and make it a biannual event? And I said, if I had the time, I might consider it. But it's one where for us as creators, you want to get known for certain content, and I do really enjoy the teacher Olympics and stuff like that.
Right.
But there's just little side projects I would like to focus on a little bit more, um, because it was just so difficult to to run that competition for that period of time. It genuinely took up probably quite often 6 to 8 hours of my day trying to just deal with the messages and deal with the content and
Wow.
responding. And yeah, and obviously I learned quite a lot about how to manage it more over time. But
Hmm.
when you're teaching full time at the same time, and then you're trying to immigrate and you're trying to get set up, it was one where I was like, this is difficult. I'll do it for this year. I probably won't continue into the future. But if I ever was to take a break from teaching and I was doing more with social media, I would definitely consider doing it again on a bigger scale, and maybe even have prizes, proper prizes that I could send to people for winning, or potentially even trying to run one in person where I say, okay, we're in America for 2 weeks. If you're in whatever state, if you're in Florida or if you're in North Carolina or wherever you might be, if you're a local teacher, here's a competition on this particular Saturday for your area. come down and meet us, and we'll put together something, and then we'll run it all over the country or something. I'd love to take it to that kind of scale. In my head, it's either go big or go home, and for that's the way I would see it. It was good, but I think it could be better.
I feel like you can make it grow. Given that you have the time to make it happen, because you're such a likable person, and it really comes through in your content that you really love the connections that you have with your students and what you teach, which some teachers don't have that as much. They just kind of do it and just to get it over with. But it's really great to see an educator who really enjoys what they do and enjoys the connections that they have, not only with their students, but with their community at large. Like being able to put together a global community, even to come together for something that seems really menial. It's like, oh, well, I'm an educator. I want to be involved in the games. Like, I can represent my country. This would be really cool. So being able to come together for something like that, and being able to be the person to put it together, it really just says a lot about who you are as a person and how much you really enjoy what it is you do. So I personally thank you, because that it takes a lot to get into the space where you can just be successful by just having an idea and then having a lot of people come along and help you execute it. So I think that's really cool.
I appreciate that, but I must say, like, as much as I enjoy my job and as positive as I am as a teacher, I did, prior to the pandemic, and I suppose before I started things on TikTok, I think I nearly did kind of reach a breaking point with teaching where I felt like I wasn't making a difference. And I think that's important to note, that for anyone out there that's listening, as an educator, if you feel fed up and you feel like you're not making a difference, and I think a lot of teachers do reach that point within the first couple of years of teaching, it's no harm to reflect on what is it about the job that you're finding frustrating, and seeing if there's ways of overcoming it, or looking at education from another perspective that will make you feel better about the job you're doing. Because I genuinely was ready to leave, and I was so lucky that when I did leave the UK and come back to Ireland, that I said, you know what, I'm going to give education another go. I'm going to do my stuff on TikTok where I'm teaching my lessons once a week. I'm going to go and try and apply to some schools, and when my license comes in, try and get in and start education there as well. But I said I'd give it one more year, and if it doesn't feel like it's going the way I want, then yeah, I can jump into another field. Like, as a scientist, there's so many opportunities outside of education anyway. But I said, give it one more year, and I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad that I didn't leave education when I did, because I've found my passion for it again.
How do you gauge that, though? So a lot of us can understand what it feels like to not be as motivated or as passionate on certain days. Like, oh, today is going to be a drag, or, this week just wasn't my week in the field that I'm working in. But how do you gauge whether or not you are hitting your marks? Not that you're hitting marks that have been set up by, the school or your admin or even your county, but how do you know when you kind of run out of gas on teaching?
I mean, if we were able to figure out a way globally of how we prevent teacher burnout, I think we would probably solve the shortfall that's happening in every country at the moment. For me, it was about measuring my own emotions and my mood, and just overall how I felt my teaching was going. And I wasn't afraid to reach out and look for feedback off students at times as well. I was finding myself getting up extremely early to get into work in the morning, and then leaving work extremely late, and then taking more work home with me. And it never seemed to be this break from teaching. And as much as I loved my schools as well, I must really say that I loved the schools I was working in. But I remember being told, we work you hard for 6 to 8 weeks, and then you get your week off, and then we go hard again for another 6 to 8 weeks. And you're going, okay, that seems fair enough. But then when it came to the breaks, you actually weren't resting, because you were doing more work to catch up. before you started your next block, and you never actually stopped throughout the entire school year. And that was really hard because you're using the time you're supposed to have earned to have off. You're still
Right.
working. You're still constantly going. And I found myself getting more and more tired. By the end of the school day, I just felt shattered. I felt like I had no energy left on a regular basis. And I was trying to play sport at the time as well. And there was days where I was like, I don't feel like I can go and actually train. I just need to go home and lie down for a while. And I just wasn't motivated to do the things that I was passionate about outside of school. And at the time, I'd moved into a middle leadership role as well. And it was just, I was getting more frustrated with my day to day. And eventually some of my students came and said, "Sir, you don't seem to be like you normally are. You're normally fun and energetic. And right now it just feels like you're coming in just teaching and then leaving to go the other aspect of your job."
Mm.
And it really hit me that when the students were noticing that I wasn't as present in the classroom, that's when I needed to step back and go, I need to reevaluate what's important here. I need to
Right.
reevaluate the amount of time I'm spending in school. I reevaluate what I am putting my efforts towards. Am I actually doing tasks that are meaningful, or am I doing stuff that's trivial and don't actually matter? And is my teaching and the learning of my students suffering? And kind of when I stopped and sat back and evaluated everything and said, you know what, I'm going to have a work-life balance now. I'm going to be staying until 6 or 7 in the evening and then taking work home. If I can't do it between 7 in the morning and 5 o'clock, if it's not done during that time, and I didn't mind staying on that extra hour after school because I had a middle leadership role to fulfill. But if I couldn't
Right.
fill it in that hour before school and that hour after school, it's not getting done. I'm not going to be working ridiculous hours just because I feel I need to. I'm going to have a life, and then anything that isn't done doesn't get done. And likewise, when it comes to my lessons, that was one of my first priorities. Am I planning lessons that are going to be beneficial to my students? Great.
Hmm.
That's number one. Once that's planned, everything else can come afterwards. If all this extra bonus stuff, the documentation and everything else that the school wants to have so that they can, prove that we're on top and that we're doing XYZ and that we're reaching out, we're looking after all of these kids for extra lessons outside of the school hours and that all that doesn't come until I know that my students are being looked after. And once I did that, I actually felt a lot better about my role as well. But not good enough that I was like, I'm going to stay teaching in the UK. I was like, no, I need to change. I need to go home, back to Ireland to see what it was like. And for me over here now, I see a lot more teachers with that kind of attitude. The day starts for you, a half hour to an hour before the school day technically begins.
Hmm.
More so a half hour. A lot of teachers are, in a half hour before the school just to do their little bits and pieces. But pretty much almost as soon as the school day is ended, they're leaving to go do something else with their life. There's that kind of separation and going, teachers are humans at the end of the day. That's their time for teaching.
Right.
Afterwards is their time to be, pursuing stuff with their family or their sport or just maintaining a healthy relationship between their work and their life. And that was so great to see. And I felt this is actually really working for teachers. And also, when we look at it, all these extra little pieces that admin push onto you to try and, show that you were an unbelievable school. A lot of it doesn't count for anything. So why are we doing it? Why not cut it back down to the important things like the teaching and learning in the class? There's just so much extra waffle, so much extra that's just unnecessary hassle. And all it does is it stresses teachers out. They stop focusing on the classroom. They stop focusing on students because they're
Right.
trying to tick boxes to make someone else happy. What an absolute waste of time. Waste of time. Can we not just go back to making life easy and focusing on the class, And it a lot of the time, and someone said to me, and I said, you know what, I completely understand where you would get that feeling from. They were in a middle leadership position like I was, and they were saying it just feels sometimes like we're being told to do this stuff because they're afraid that we're idle. They're afraid that we don't have enough to be doing, so they want to keep us busy because that way, they can't be saying, "Oh, well, our teachers are lazy." No, we're going to give them everything to do. Quite often, this is a bugbear for me at times. A lot of the time, towards the end of the academic year, when students are about to go do their exams, they're given something called study leave. And during study leave, the teaching periods that you would have had with those students, you now have free. So that's the first time in the academic year where you're going to have a little bit more time than traditionally.
Okay.
And teachers generally are quite sensible during that time. They go, okay, this is a time for me to catch up with marking. This is a time for me to catch up with, renovating the classroom, making it look better so that's ready for next year. Or it's going to give me an opportunity to make new presentations or new activities for future topics that I want to cover next year or whatever. It's kind of, a lot of teachers are proactive in forward planning. But because a lot of schools don't trust that you're doing it, they give documents to do where they go, can you tell us what you're going to do with this time? So you spend some of that time telling people what you're going to do with that time. Why? Why not just trust that we're going to do something with the time instead of wasting our time telling you? It just seems like you're running in circles, making paperwork for the physics. And who's looking at it? No one. Nobody's looking at it. It's just, oh my God, I couldn't believe, don't get me wrong, I love teaching at the schools I've been in, but sometimes you go, who is this for? Who is it for? Is it benefiting the kids? Is it benefiting me? Who is it for? It's ridiculous. Sorry, I feel like I've gone on a rant.
No, that's fine, because I feel like you're at the point where some parents are just like, what is this? What are we even doing here? So I completely understand, and I even asked myself that question, and when I was in teaching, like to my admin, like, are we? Is this for something, for someone? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? This is unnecessary. I know I asked that question in a lot of aspects of my life, but it's very valid, especially when you're in education. Like, don't give me busy work. I already have to do a lot to just decompress from being around the kids.
There's already so many things that we could be doing. Why give us busy work? I mean, right. There was a staff member that I used to work with, and genuinely, when something new was brought up, the first question they said is this going to benefit the kids? Is this going to benefit? And they would be so blunt. They put their hand up and they say, out of interest, does this seem like it's going to benefit kids? And if there was a pause, if there was that kind of silence going, well, it might do this, and you go, okay, if it's not benefiting the kids, is it benefiting us? And if there was that pause or I was struggle to answer, they're going, it's not benefiting anyone. Why are we doing this? And right. It's genuine. You would see quite often. And it's just sometimes you need people like that in education to kind of call out the bullshit. Yes. That there's that kind of sense of, let's actually call them out instead of just agreeing to it to keep people happy. But then the other side of it is, and on this kind of a sad side at times, particularly when it's staff versus admin, there kind of seems to be that kind of threshold where that teacher does stand up to saying, why are we doing this? But then they're treated differently or seen as a troublemaker for
right.
Stopping it. And there is times where genuinely stuff that's brought in by admin to improve education is probably fought against too much because people are adverse to change, and sometimes it's change that's needed. But prove to us why it's needed. Show us the benefits, and teachers will implement it. I do think when teachers are shown the benefit that can come from it, it makes a difference. But if you can't prove to us, you can't show us how it's going to benefit our students or benefit us as teachers, we don't back it, because we know it'll be something that the school will introduce for a couple of weeks and then it'll be forgotten about, and then something new is brought in. And that's the worst thing about education, is seeing all these fantastic ideas that sometimes are wishy-washy or genuinely brilliant, just genuinely not bought into, and it's just thrown away after a couple of weeks, and something new comes in and the same happens, and this new cycle every couple of weeks of something new you want us to try out that's going to cost us time and planning and effort, and you're just going to forget about it.
I'm glad to know that there are some teachers who are willing to step up though, like and say, "Hey, what are we doing this for? What are the benefits of this? Prove to me that this is going to help the kids." I'm glad that we have those kind of advocates in place. What are some, and I ask everyone this, so don't feel pressure to answer for everyone, but what are some ways that parents and students can advocate for themselves in the academic space?
I suppose a big point is to know what's available in your school and knowing your school inside out. I think that's something that I often see anyway within schools, that there's just a lack of knowledge potentially at times from parents about what actually is available within your own school community, whether that's extra tuition, extra support, whether there's, if a child has special educational needs and they're in mainstream, is there still opportunities for them to be given extra support as a result? And if so, how do you go about it? Do you need to have certain doctor letters as evidence that there's a special education need, whatever it happens to be? I think that's kind of the first and foremost. And you know, I think there happens to be a habit, and this isn't me being negative about parents, because parents are busy people as well. But what I tend to notice is that parents don't complain or say something until something happens or they're not happy, and it's, their child is being given out to, or an email comes home from a teacher going, "Oh, your child hasn't done X, Y, and Z for me in the last couple of weeks," and then suddenly the parent is coming back going, "Well, I was never informed of this in the first place." And you're going, "Yeah, but we might have wrote a note in a journal," or the child says, "Oh, I'm struggling," and the parent is going, "Well, my child is struggling. What have you done about it?" And we're like, "Well, we wanted your support, but we have X, Y, and Z available." And then it's only dealt with then, where if a parent is a little bit more involved in knowing where their child is, then they go, "Oh, actually, there is this issue I'm starting to notice myself. Maybe I can contact the school and say, look, my little Johnny is really struggling with this subject. Is there any way that there's extra support available before there's trouble because of it, and he gets in trouble inside in the class?" Or likewise, if we could get students to start talking up a little bit more and actually coming forward with their issues. I think there's this huge band of students that kind of slip under the rug and are missed completely in education. You see this top band that, because they're so intelligent and they're so academic and they're always asking the questions and they're so confident talking in class, they are always seen. You always then get the bottom group that are always misbehaving and acting out and getting all of the teachers' attention and all of, you know, the parental contact because of the behavior. But there's this huge band in the middle that, just because they're quiet and they don't, discuss the issues they're having openly with the teacher, they get forgotten about within the education system, and they just kind of get through, that they're not really given anything extra, and their experience within school is kind of mundane and boring, and not really stretching them to the best of their ability or helping them when they have difficulties. And you wish at times that you just be able to say to a student, "Could you come and just tell me how you're doing? Just like fill me in. And if you're struggling, just talk to us." That's kind of, communication is the biggest thing for me. If there's no communication there, how are teachers supposed to know there's a problem? We only end up seeing it through tests or through assessments. And you kind of want to go, you know, if you open up that communication and you talk to me about how you're doing, if you come and say, "I'm really struggling and I have been for a while, I didn't want to say anything, but I feel like I need to now before there's any assessments," we can do something. We can implement a strategy to help. But that for me is the big one. Communicate. Tell us that there's problems.
That's really good. I feel like so many people neglect to figure out, like you said, parents don't really step in until they're like, "Well, why has my kid been sent to detention, or why are they getting suspended? What do you mean they're having behavioral issues?" But if they're involved from the start, at least checking in with the teacher once a week, "Hey, how are assignments going, et cetera," so they're not finding out on the back end like the student's missing like 2 weeks worth of work. So I
Mm.
mean, and then having that example at home, that the parents are checking in, I feel increases the child's chance of speaking up when something isn't right. But if the parent is not engaged or as engaged to to make sure that the kid has everything they need. It can make it hard for the kid to say, well, I don't know what I need. I just know that things are not going as well. And I don't really know who to tell, because if I say something is wrong, am I going to get help? Am I going to get in trouble? Like, what are the consequences of that? So that's communication. Absolutely. That's a huge thing.
You actually, you mentioned something there as well that I think is really useful, just about the parental involvement at home. A little tactic that I try and talk to, if there's a parent that's having a little bit of issue with particularly a child, if they're not getting homework done, they're getting in trouble as a result, something really simple that, you know, at the end of every day when they're at home, if they're with their child, if they've done their little bit of homework, or if they're sitting down somewhere, you know, if they say, oh, have you done your homework? You're always going to get the child to say yes. And lots of parents end the conversation there, where the best thing you can do afterwards is go, oh, you have it done. Would you mind, could you get your school bag? Show me something that you've done in class recently. And even better, explain to me something. You know, I think a lot of parents feel like they've gone through education now, so I don't need to talk about what's happening in science or maths or in English anymore. But you're missing an opportunity for your child to actually show off. That's what you want to encourage kids to do. Show off your knowledge. And, you know, you might not have a clue about what the kid is talking about. I mean, if I was sitting down as a 15 or 16-year-old kid again, and my dad said, oh, tell me about something you're doing in biology, and I started explaining to him, there's no way he would have understood what I was explaining to him. But if he was saying there, he was there and I'm there explaining it to him, and then maybe eventually he would understand it, or he even goes, do you know what? I don't understand what you're saying to me, but you seem to understand it, and that's amazing. If you can say that to a kid, doesn't that make them feel a lot better about them in that subject? You know, if you're saying, wow, you're doing really well, I'm so glad, like you explained that so well. You might not have a clue what's going on. That could go straight over your head. But if you said, you explained that so well, I'm so proud of you, keep doing it, they're more likely to do the actual work. Or the vice versa, they've said to you they've done the homework, then you go, explain this to me, and then they kind of pause, and there's that you found out now they have done the work. Bang, you solved an issue. Go, okay, let's turn off Netflix or TV or whatever we're doing at the moment. Let's get that done, and then that'll save you getting in trouble tomorrow. That's the thing I always notice. You see, you know, the parents that have got, did you do your homework? Yes, great. That's another problem for me to solve. Go away and leave me alone for a night. Just get a little bit, that 5 minutes every night, massive difference. And your relationship gets better because you get an opportunity to praise your child, praise the life out of them, and they improve so much. That's why I notice with school, if you have an opportunity to catch a kid doing something good and you can praise them, they come looking for more praise. Catch them doing something good and they come back. Catch them doing something bad and you give out to them, they're less likely to try and talk to you in the future. So look for those praise moments. Teachers as well, actually, that's something that we're very guilty of. We don't praise enough as teachers, but I think there's a nice opportunity for parents to build a relationship. Sorry, I felt like the need to say that it's not just the parents.
No, I agree. If you are in a child's life, whether you are a parent, a teacher, a mentor, a faculty member, a godfather, a cousin, if you play a role, like, you got to inspire the kids. I would hope you would want to inspire the kids, make them be better, even if they surpass you. Like, that's what we hope. We don't want them to start off where we were. We want them to be even further. So make sure you give them that encouragement, give them that praise, just so that the kid can show off. Like, you like to show off, let them show off. Like, they're 10, they just learned about, like, what do 10-year-olds learn about? They learn about the stars, or they learn about how to write in cursive. Do kids write in cursive? I don't think they write in cursive anymore. I don't know what kids
not really, no.
Nowadays.
They're too busy texting to write in cursive.
Whatever they did, I wholeheartedly agree that it's important to just, like, let them show off a bit. Like, yes, I colored inside the lines this time. Like, yes, awesome. I found 2 rocks when I was outside. Hey, listen, you enjoy yourself. As long as there's no bugs on the rocks, I'm good. That's cool. We're good.
Oh, even better if there are bugs on the rocks. That's my kind of stuff now. We talk about what kind of bug it is. We'll be talking about what kind of rock it is.
Next time my nephew finds a bug, I'm going to have him give it to you because I'm so tired of him just like picking up bugs and like handing them off. And I'm like, what do you? No, it's gross. What do you?
I
You're
said my
two.
Instagram DMs will now be filled with pictures of bugs that people are sending me going, can you talk to my child about the kind of bug?
You're gonna be like, oh man, why did I say that? Nope. Okay, that's this. As long as it's not a black widow, we're good. We're good. Yes. No. But he absolutely just he's not even two yet. And he'll just pick up bugs. And I'm just like, I don't even know how your brain functions. I no. Ugh, gross. But thank you so much for this conversation. Can you tell people where they can find you, anything you have coming up, plug your social media, anything that you have going on? Now is your time to shine. Go ahead and plug away.
Sure thing. So, I suppose the best place to find me as an individual is on Instagram or TikTok at Teach with Tadgh. That's where I'm kind of at most of the time. I post content there on the daily. I do have secretly, and you're getting this is the first public mention of it. I do have a podcast coming out in November for the first time. It's myself and another Irish creator, my girlfriend and I. We are both starting a podcast together. So there will be aspects of education, but because she isn't an educator, we've decided it's best that we just talk about everything from daily life and kind of, I suppose for me, we get to talk about aspects that my students might not get to hear in school. So there's a little bit more of that as well. It's a lot more comedy based and a lot more jokey, but we do inspire because a lot of the content she makes as well. I'm actually going to plug her as much as I'm going to plug myself. She's Chelsea 1302. She's very well known for a lot of her Kevin Hart skits and dancing and motivation. So the two of us are starting our podcast. It is called the T's and C's of Play podcast. And yeah, that is coming out very soon as well. So if anyone wants to listen to two very thick Irish accents waffling on about a different topic every week, that is coming up in November. But don't tell anyone before then.
I'll make sure to plug your podcast as soon as it comes out. It'll be in the show notes. Make sure to go follow Tadgh, follow his girlfriend. Make sure that you all check out the podcast when it drops. Thank you so much for being on the show. If your child also finds bugs, send them directly to Tadgh. I don't want to see them. I don't
Straight
need
to
to
me.
be involved. Just DM him directly, and maybe he can help your child get into the sciences because we do need more in the STEM field. But thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Please make sure to follow Take Up Space Pod. That's Take Up Space POD on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you would like to see our lovely faces, you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel where we drop every week. Make sure that you support us and Tadgh, and I'm really interested in hearing the podcast when it comes out. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been Take a Space Podcast, the education series. Y'all have a great one. Thank you.